without doubt, the most consequential African leader since 1951. Osagyefo died from food poisoning at a hospital in Eastern Europe. He was co-president of Guinea-Conakry. Labeled by the CIA and other Western intelligence agencies as the most dangerous black man alive, Nkrumah was the #1 enemy of the West from 1951 until his death. Even after they successfully overthrew his regime in Ghana in 1966 by proxy, they could not let rest as long as he was alive. Sékou Touré had offered to resign and let him lead Guinea, which offer Nkrumah declined. But the co-presidency position he took was not ceremonial. He at times observed cabinet meetings, and all cabinet ministers in the Touré government were obligated to consult with him regularly. He even traveled with Touré on foreign trips and continued to write books and articles to inspire young revolutionaries around the continent and the diaspora. Osagyefo succumbed to the slow poisoning of his food in a hospital in Romania, having lost his trusted personal chef, suddenly only 6 months after his arrival in Conakry in 1966. Western secret agents involved in his overthrow were all promoted. Amilcar Cabral, Guinea-Bissau, 1973. Assassinated at point-blank range on a street in Conakry. Cabral was an agricultural engineer by training. He was also one of the brightest and most inspiring young revolutionaries of his time. He was killed by a paid assassin on a street in Conakry 2 years before his native Guinea-Bissau gained its independence. He was the founder of the PAIG, or Partido Africano da Independencia, da Guinea Cabo Verde, African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde. His Portuguese enemies blamed his death on internal PAIG's rivalry and other ludicrous theories. But Africans know better. Emperor Haile Selassie, Ethiopia, 1975. Cold-blooded assassination after his overthrow in 1974. An unapologetic believer in African independence, Tafari's role as a founding member and first host of the Organization of African Unity and unbridled support for liberation movements around the continent had made him an enemy of the former European colonizers and their allies. Richard Ratzimandrava, Madagascar, 1975. Assassinated. Colonel Ratzimandrava was killed after only 6 days in office because of the changes he had announced he wanted to make to better his people's lives, which were deemed unfavorable to Western interests. Herbert Chitepo, Zimbabwe, 1975. Assassinated. A brilliant thinker and lawyer, Chitepo recognized that the real enemy was the exploitative Western economic system imposed on his people, and therefore mobilized them to challenge and change the status quo. This made him an enemy of the West. A British author claimed publicly that a former soldier of the British Special Air Service, SAS, Hugh Hind, was responsible for Chitepo's murder, but nothing came out of the crime. General Murtala Muhammad, Nigeria, 1976. Assassinated in a seemingly normal botched coup attempt. Popular Gen Muhammad spent only 7 months in office, but started and completed more development projects than any of his predecessors. He was also the initiator of the relocation of Nigeria's federal capital from the congested southern city of Lagos to a more serene and spacious location in the center of the country. However, he had refused to accept a $1 billion loan offer from the IMF to build a steel plant, which his successor quickly accepted. Yet after spending billions in interest payments on that loan since 1980, the steel plant remains incomplete to this day. Marian Ngouabi, Republic of Congo, 1977. Assassinated. Ngouabi was long accused of harboring leftist views and was deemed a troublemaker within the army for criticizing the French-backed president of his country. Demoted from commissioned officer to soldier for his views, he was arrested and detained on the orders of the president. It was while in detention that his allies in the military freed him and launched a coup that culminated in him taking charge of his homeland from 1968 to 1977. But Nguabi's powerful foreign enemies never forgave him. They struck in 1977 and ended his life. President Ali Soili Comoros, 1978, assassinated. Though Soili took on several revolutionary battles to change the minds and ways of his people, from getting rid of the wasteful and costly traditional marriages and funeral rites to empowering the youth and lifting restrictions on female dress codes, his biggest crime was probably his open hostility and antagonism towards his country's colonial overlord. Soili was overthrown by the same French mercenary, Bob Denard, who had helped install him. He was killed while trying to escape house arrest after his overthrow. William Tolbert, Liberia, 1980. Assassinated in a coup led by Sergeant Samuel Doe, a descendant of repatriated former slaves on American plantations, who constituted 2% of the Liberian population, but had controlled all important public positions in Liberian public life. From 1847 until his succession of Tubman in 1972, Tolbert had started altering the way things were done in his country. He appointed the first indigenous African to his cabinet and started making other changes from Liberia's foreign policy to questioning lopsided extractive resource deals with Western companies. Many believe these were his crimes. Ahmed Sekou Touré, Guinea-Conakry, 1984. Died under anesthesia on an operating table. An unapologetic Pan-Africanist, co-founder of the OAU, the Casablanca Group, first proponent and sponsor of ANC's armed wing in West Africa, and host to Nkrumah, Cabral, Miriam Makeba, Stokely Carmichael, and many other African nationalists, Touré was no friend of the West. He visited Paris in 1983 after 2 decades of French covert and overt operations to eliminate him, and appeared well and hearty, having delivered several public lectures to the French establishment on Africa and his positions. However, in less than a year after his visit, he supposedly had a heart condition that could not be fixed in Morocco, where he had gone for checkup. Lured to America, he died on the operating table in Cleveland, Ohio, where he was assured by the Americans that their doctors could easily correct his ailment. In 2011, a former French ambassador to Guinea confessed publicly in Conakry that he was aware of 52 plots by his country to kill or remove Touré from office. Samora Machel. Mozambique, 1986. Machel was assassinated by the remote electronic hijacking of his helicopter's navigation system, leading to its crashing into the side of a mountain near the Mozambique-South Africa border.